Welcome one, welcome all to DeFi Crypto and Airdrops. I am Mike, aka Veteran Crypto, and with me as always on Mondays is Taylor. He is an estate attorney down in McKinney, Texas, and owner of a title company, and also a co-owner on a business with Jeff, who will be joining us here pretty soon. Actually, you know what? Let me kick on over to this where I can share my screen. There we go. All right. So this is his law firm's website. And if you are in the state of Texas and have any questions about estate planning, a small business, tax consulting, uncontested divorces, probate, any of that, Taylor's your guy. 355-star Google reviews. And also, him and Jeff have WG Plan. Jeff is I always get this wrong. Basically, he has all the licenses to give you financial advice. So he'll be here in a minute. But if you are looking for ways to protect your wealth, and ways using TradFi to increase your wealth, this is where you're wanting to go to get assistance with that, and they can help you anywhere, not just Texas with that. Is that correct, Taylor?
Yeah, that's awesome. Federal, so it's all over the country.
Perfect. This is the newsletter that myself and Taylor do every morning, Monday through Friday. And it touches on TradFi and DeFi. We give ranges. We give, for both trading and, DeFi liquidity pools. And then also just kind of a market overview and news, hot news, for that day. And then, of course, you have our channel, DeFi Crypto and Airdrops, over on YouTube. And if you want to join us on the arena, this is another place where we stream. It's a crypto-based platform that we just started streaming on, and really enjoying it. I'm actually, learning quite a bit about, this aspect of, kind of blockchain technology with social media. So anyway, that's what we got going on. So, there's Jeff. There he is. Oh, what's that?
Yes. Yes. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
All right. I said you did a great job with, all the licenses thing. That was correct.
Oh, okay. Perfect.
Yes. We're an RIA firm, which means we're a fiduciary-based financial planner. So I tell people if it's legal and ethical, it's on the table, at least as a conversation piece.
Perfect. Well, that kind of brings me to what I was hoping to talk about today, because one thing that I notice a lot, especially in crypto, is everyone talking about getting rich and overnight and getting rich quick, and then they're going to start buying Lambos and mansions and yachts, and everybody is basically going to do what people that win the lottery or sports figures when they first start making a bunch of money, basically what they start doing with it, hookers and blow, and they just go through.
That was what we were going to call WG Plan, but we decided to pare back just a little.
Yes. A website called Hookers and Blow might do quite well. So basically what I want to talk about is, and both of you gentlemen are intimately familiar because you have many, many clients that are very wealthy. And I know that there is tricks and I call them tricks, but they're all legal, where the wealthy tap into their liquidity or their investments without cashing them out. So they build a machine that generates yield or income. They are able to fund their lifestyle, but at the same time, they never exit their investments. They never incur a taxable event. And I just kind of want to kick it over to you, gentlemen, and just kind of, what is it that you, as a lawyer and as a financial advisor, how is it that you instruct your clients to do this?
You want to start, Jeff?
Sure. Well, the primary way people can get, there's a multitude of ways you can utilize your assets, right? Whether it's real estate, whether it's your stock portfolio. But basically what you're talking about, all is all derived from the same basic principle. And recently, actually, this was kind of a big deal on Twitter. I saw Bill Ackman talk about a way to maybe change the rules, because it certainly benefits the very wealthiest the most. But what you'll find at the highest levels is a lot of times, particularly for like CEOs of companies like the Elon Musks of the world, right? For either political reasons or tax reasons, or just the perspective it will give the outs. You can't like really tell people to buy your stock and at the same time liquidate all your holdings, right? So what they'll do is borrow against their assets. Like they got to pay for the jet, right? They got to pay for the private chef. They got to pay for the house in the Hamptons. And so what they'll do is they'll get a line of credit against their holdings, and they'll post their securities as collateral. But so let's just say, for grins, and I mean, Tesla's gone all over the place, but let's just say it's, 10 years ago, Tesla's $100 a share or whatever. And you got $1 billion, you borrow you can borrow $500 million out. And then as long as Tesla stock long-term keeps going up, not only did you borrow the money to have liquidity, but a lot of times, depending upon how big a fish you are, sometimes you can even roll in the interest just to make the loan bigger and bigger. So you have a growing loan, right? But you have a growing portfolio, and as long as you maintain that corridor, everything works out just fine. The reason why they want to do loans, though, is just like us, regular folk. Anybody that's in the comments that's ever gotten a mortgage, right? So let's just, right now I think the average house is almost $500,000 now across the country. Let's just say, you make $150,000 a year as a household, and you go that year to go buy a house, and you borrow $500,000 from the bank to buy a home. You don't have to tell Uncle Sam that you made $650,000. You didn't. You made $150,000 in wages, and you borrowed as a loan $500,000. And because you're going to pay that money back plus interest, it's not recognized as income by the U.S. Tax authority, right? By the IRS. So because loans are not considered income, that's how the wealthy are able to get around so many different, they're able to maintain their tax bracket, maintain their investments, or keep a minimized tax bracket, maintain their investments, and still live a lavish lifestyle. But you can do this at a much lower level if you want to. Now there's risk involved, of course, because if you're a bigger fish, you can actually do a loan that's kind of collateralized by, but separate from your brokerage account. But for more of the normies, you can do what's called a margin loan, right? So you can borrow against your portfolio, but if your portfolio falls by a certain amount, they immediately call that, and they're going to sell your positions.
You get liquidated.
You get liquidated, right? Which happens all the time in the crypto community, right? Because of the volatility. So,
and people using way too much leverage.
Right, they absolutely do use too much leverage. So I do, but you're right. There's it's one of the most frustrating things, and I'm not necessarily a pure capitalist, no matter what, like in a Fountainhead or Atlas Shrugged sense. But it does piss me off when you see things like Warren Buffett pays a lower tax rate than his secretary. Well, yes, but he's still paying hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in taxes. It's just at a 15% rate, right? Because that's on long-term capital gains, or 20% rate on long-term capital gains versus ordinary income. So some of this stuff is pretty misleading, as far as what people pay. But yeah, I mean, you're absolutely, once you have enough liquidity or enough assets, you can solve your liquidity problem through loans any way you want, which really helps, even if it's just to get to the end of the year so you can sell some assets in the next year and manage your tax liability. Taylor and I talk all the time about how, the biggest strategy, the biggest things we do for clients isn't quote unquote beating the market. It's tax planning. Well, for him, it's estate planning, but it's tax planning, estate planning, and, structuring things to minimize losses and taxes over a period of years. And there's a lot of tools that come into that.
So, and correct me if I'm wrong, but and I might be, but a lot of what you guys do is basically build a machine that generates yield. And so, if you take any cog of that out by cashing it out, potentially you can break the machine that's, generating that yield. So, and that's what is growing your portfolio. And then by taking these loans out, and I'm just trying to kind of boil this down and simplify it a little bit. But, as your portfolio is growing, the way that, you're explaining is you're tapping into that liquidity to fund your lifestyle. So you don't necessarily want to break the machine that is growing your net worth, but you do want to tap into it to, like you said, buy your yacht and, do all whatever it is you're going to do.
Yeah.
Right.
But let's go through probably what most of our listeners, they're not going to have a bunch of assets that they can do a strategy like that. So mostly this strategy done by regular folk is done through real estate. And, the way you're doing it is because you go out and buy, a property. Usually it's because you're going to, get good rent off the property. That's the key. And you're going to have somebody else be paying on that property, and they're paying it down. And real estate generally appreciates because they devalue the dollar, and we're not building enough real estate still in the United States well, I should qualify that. In certain areas, we're not building enough real estate. And so you buy properties, and I'll give you a little example from my own kind of personal experience. When I was in law school, I bought a bunch of properties, and then when I was flipping them, I flipped those into real estate that I own. So I did a 1031 exchange and moved that money into a commercial building that I was running my business out of. And then once that property got too small, the current building that we're in, I did another 1031 exchange and did this building. So as that money's appreciated and as that value is appreciated, I never had to recognize the taxes, not yet. And I've been able to increase the value of that portfolio. And so far, I've never really paid taxes on any of that because I'm able to take advantage of that system. And the reason why the government allows you to do that is because they have to encourage investment into real estate. If they didn't, then the government would have to build housing. If it's not tax advantage for people, people aren't going to go build homes because most of the population still rents. And so the one weird caveat of this is you can effectively keep doing that and then pass it on to your children, and your children will get a stepped up basis and they can sell the property and not pay any taxes on any of the gains. And so people commonly use that system as their real estate gains value. They then take loans against that real estate to buy more real estate. Yep. And, so it's generally people, super wealthy people that have a lot of assets, of course, can pull this off because they can do it at such a low amount of actual assets that they have that they're, maybe.
You mean like taking low leverage? So they might have $10 million and that they'll basically take out enough to where they're making like $100,000 or $200,000 a year. So basically the leverage is so low, there's no risk or very low risk of liquidation.
Yeah. And so they're able to pull that off because they can do it. Like Jeff is very aware of how you can do it with life insurance. Mm-hmm. There's ways to use it with life insurance. So when the death benefit eventually pays out, it pays off your loan. And so
tell us a little bit more about that. Cause I've heard of people talking about like whole life or like in things like that.
Right. So I will tell there's literally nothing I've seen in my entire career that can be misused and misdesigned so poorly as life insurance. So the largest one I ever did was a $25 million face amount, which means if the person died, they get $25 million. We actually borrowed money from a bank to put money in at about $1 million a year. It was a really interesting strategy, worked really well. But I've also seen a ton of people, and if you basically ignore everything you see on TikTok about life insurance, it's trash. Okay. So it can be designed really, really well. I mean, as in people with 8 figures do this, right? Or more. However, it has to be designed for the benefit of the client, not the person selling it to you, which is a huge caveat, and they should be able to explain all of it to you. But in general, when you fund life insurance, whether you're putting in $300 a month into a whole life or a variable life or an index life policy, you're putting in 300 grand a year or $3 million a year, which believe it or not, you can do as long as the policy is big enough. As you build that cash value inside that policy, that's your money. And it grows, and there's some pretty unique things. Now, it depends on the state you're in, but here in Texas, well, federally, there's some laws, and then there's state laws too. But in Texas, all the assets inside life insurance are fully litigation-proof, creditor-proof. Cannot be, it's almost like a house. It can't be touched, okay? All the money grows tax-deferred. So it's after-tax money that goes in, it grows tax-deferred. And then if you want to, whether you're over the age of 59 and a half or not, you can take money out through withdrawals if you wish, up to your basis, that's tax-free. Or you can borrow money out, and that's tax-free. And when you borrow the money out, you either pay no interest, which is called a wash loan. The reason you pay no interest is actually this is really important. So I'm going to say that for argument's sake, you're the life insurance company, right? And Mike and Taylor's the client, and I'm the policy. Okay.
Oh.
Weird. Go. If Taylor wants to take money out of his policy, if he takes money out of his policy and takes it to himself, that's a withdrawal. And if it's past his basis, that's income. But if he borrows against his policy, the policy sends, let's say 100 grand to the insurance company. That's you. And you, the insurance company, put that in a collateral account, earning a guaranteed, let's say 3% interest. It's actually delineated in the policy itself. They actually declare the interest rate. So let's say you take 100 grand out of the policy, you put it to the side in a collateral account at the insurance company, Mike. Then you, Mike, the insurance company, write a check to Taylor for 100 grand. And you ask Taylor, say, hey, Taylor, you want to pay 3% interest or you want to let it ride? Taylor's like, let's let it ride. I don't really want to pay interest if I don't have to. So Taylor does this. The next day he gets, Rip Van Winkle or something, and he's like in a coma for 20 years. Then he wakes up and goes, I can't believe you guys didn't pull the plug, and croaks and dies, right? And his kids find the insurance policy, and they're like, oh, Dad had an insurance policy. And they go to the bank, they take me, the policy, to the insurance company. The insurance company goes, oh, well, you know what? Your dad had like 100 grand in cash value, and he borrowed that out 20 years ago, and he owes us all this interest on the policy, okay? But before you can say that and crush Taylor's kids' dreams, you notice in your system that there's a mirror account that has the collateral for the loan, and it earned interest the entire time. So the collateral interest that's at the insurance company pays off the loan that's outstanding, and the net death benefit pays tax-free to the heirs. That's the mechanics of how loans work. So if you build a life insurance policy, now you need to be in good health so you don't get killed in ratings. You need to overfund the policy, which means you put a lot more money in than you have to, because when you put extra money in, it goes straight to the cash value. Just like when you pay extra on your mortgage, it goes straight to your principal. It doesn't pay the CEO. It doesn't pay the agent. It doesn't pay the janitor. It pays just you. Okay.
Got it. So
overfund it, and you let that grow for 10 or 15 or 20 years. You end up having a nice pile of money that you can withdraw tax-free that continues to grow. So let's say you got $1 million in there. You're like, you know what? I'm going to take out 50 grand a year. You take out 50 grand a year, as long as that's earning 50 grand a year on average, you're never really going to eat through your principal. You get a bunch of tax-free income, and then when you pass on, it goes to your kids, your grandkids, tax-free. It's a pretty neat trick.
And they can do the same thing.
And that's what you can do. So if you're a regular person, life insurance and real estate are the two places you can borrow against relatively easily, if not guaranteed. Obviously, you can borrow against your house. You can borrow against life insurance because that's contractually guaranteed. Then the next thing is your stock portfolio or your business, right? So as you go up the wealth ladder, you get a lot more options, right? But everybody can utilize, and the thing that is important about this is when you want to utilize these kinds of strategies is when your liquidity needs, right, don't naturally match up with your investment desires or goals. So like maybe this is the year you need to buy a house, and your wife's like, this is the house I want. and you're looking at your account going, man, there's no way I'm selling right now because my stuff's on fire and it's going to grow up 40% this year, in my opinion.
Yeah.
That's why you want to have strategies like this that you can access liquidity without necessarily giving up the growth.
Speaking of which, man, freaking this weekend and this morning, freaking crypto's been creeping its way up.
Well, you see, so I sent you the thing about Jamie Dimon, right? Did you see that, Taylor?
Yeah.
That's a hell of a pivot.
Yeah, it always scares me when he does stuff like that.
Anytime. I saw Wells Fargo or Bank of America is now letting 4% or 5% of their clients' assets go into crypto as far as what they recommend their advisors to. I mean, it's certainly becoming more mainstream by the week.
Oh yeah, no, and it's only going to accelerate. I mean, really, I'm surprised that it's that they're adopting as fast as they have been with very little legislation. You know, for the most part in the U.S., the Genius Act, the Stablecoin Act, is about the only thing that's really been signed into law for the most part.
Something got put in front of this.
Yes,
I don't know.
Yeah.
Some came in this last 3 or 4 days to try to keep the SEC out, which always makes me a little bit suspicious when you're trying to, But
the reason that they're doing that is because of the court case where Ripple was the SEC had served a Wells notice to Ripple, and Ripple had to defend itself because the SEC was saying that XRP was a security. And Ripple ended up somewhat winning that. I believe the last I heard, it was retail sales were not a security, but institutional sales were. That's a road we could go down. But what they have decided is the CFTC should be the overseeing body, not the SEC for crypto.
That makes sense to me, honestly.
Yeah.
It's more of a commodity than is a security for sure.
There's no legal obligation, and that's why I always talk about XRP, where it wasn't necessarily bullish for XRP for that judgment, because if that judgment was that XRP was a security, then technically you would own part of Ripple, and they would have a fiduciary responsibility to pay yield, or basically they wouldn't be able to just dump XRP to fund operations. So, I'm glad that crypto isn't a security. However, it wasn't necessarily bullish that that judge's ruling. So I'll just leave it at that. Taylor.
Go ahead, Taylor.
Well, I don't really have much more to say on the lending and being able to do that. I mean, you can use charitable remainder trust to also do it. That is it with people's IRAs and 401ks. This is probably something that people need to understand is like, if you're going to be inheriting a large IRA or 401k, let's say your parents, they've racked up a ton of money in their IRA, then you have to pull all that money out within 10 years when you inherit it. And that is income to you when you do that.
Are there ways you can mitigate that?
Yes, there are a lot of ways to mitigate it and reduce it. And you need to talk to an estate planning attorney, or your parents need to, about how to structure that out. Because, I had somebody come in and, they had $3 million in their IRA, and their daughter was a doctor. She's already at the highest tax bracket.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. And so effectively, when she starts pulling this out after they pass away, she's going to have to pay about 42% of it to the federal government.
Damn.
And so explaining that, that $3 million, 42% of it's going to go to the federal government if you guys don't do something. And so, sitting down and figuring that out is an incredibly important thing to do, because one thing to really understand, it is incredibly difficult to get wealthy from your job.
Oh, yeah.
Because you have to look at it from the understanding of, well, basically most people feel like, well, I don't make a lot, so I don't have a big tax. Well, before you pay any income tax, theoretically, 15.3%, right? Is the employee tax total, Jeff, right? And so
yeah.
And so when you think about it like that, theoretically your employer isn't paying you the part that they have to pay in taxes where they could be. Now, would they? Well, that's a different argument. But at least was 6.75% is what you're paying off the top of every dollar that you earn up to, what is it, 140 something right now, right? 140,000
for the exemption.
No, your employment tax.
No, it's 170. It's 173,000, I think.
I never keep track. They always increase it so much every year.
I'll tell you in a second.
Yeah, it's up to. So you got to think on that amount of money, you're paying first that tax, and then you pay your income tax on top of that.
184,500.
Oh my gosh, they increase that faster than they do inflation, don't they?
Oh, much. When I 100%, without question.
Yeah. It's funny because they'll say, "Oh, we increased Social Security with inflation," but that number has gone up way faster than
the cost of living adjustment does not keep pace. Anything the government manages, like my military retirement, it does not scale with inflation. I'm basically losing money every year.
Yeah. And so the same thing with your Social Security. That's the thing you have to understand is all of us, was it 33% have lost 33% of our purchasing power since 2020 of our Social Security?
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's sad because most people.
Oh my gosh.
Dude,
well, the average person, I was watching somebody did some math, and they were saying that basically if they would have everything that they paid into Social Security over their lifetime of working amounted to roughly $1.9 million, put in and earning, I think it was like a 5% return, that would give them $95,000 a year to live off of. Whereas they paid it in Social Security, who's going to pay them roughly $30-something thousand a year. So where did the rest of that money go? And then, take into account inflation and everything else, you're screwed. I mean, it's why it boggles my mind that anybody wants the government to take more taxes from anybody, and they want the government to run anything, because everything they touch is run like shit. And if it was a business, it would not be in business.
So here's where yes, and I get it, and I'm not arguing with you in theory. However, most people get well more out of Social Security than they pay in because they're not at that, because it's such a progressive thing, right? So you're 100% right. The guy that paid in 1.9 million, yeah, there's no way. But if you made the equivalent of, let's just say today's dollars, 45 grand a year, like you were a teacher or that's teachers more than that now, but you know what I mean? Like if you were in a more modest means place, you end up finding out that the average person gets paid back within like 2.5 years of retirement. And so just like everything else, we're subsidizing, right, wrong, or indifferent, we're subsidizing the lower middle classes from an earnings perspective.
That is a valid point. That is a valid point.
And so it's this weird thing because, and I actually got in an argument.
I'm with C90 though. I would still much rather opt out of it and just invest it myself.
Well, right, but that's the whole thing, right? It's sort of like if I take my family out to dinner, and I got my 2 kids and my wife, and if my wife opt out of paying, guess what happens? We have to walk out on the dinner because my kids aren't paying, right? Like they don't get the money. So the challenge becomes, and this is where I think a lot of people get really frustrated, and I understand this, is like, well, that's not my problem, right? This whole, like, because I was mentioning, I got a Social Security discussion on Twitter the other day, and basically the same exact thing.
No.
Right? Just let us invest our own money. And I'm like, right, but your money isn't invested anywhere. Your money literally goes in from your payroll taxes, and that same year goes out the door. 76 cents of every single 76 cents of every single dollar that goes out the door for Social Security.
But that's a Social Security model, though, right?
That's the Social Security, right? That's Social Security. So that's where the FICA tax goes, though, right? So what I'm getting at is there's this
that FICA bitch is always taking my money.
But there's this feeling that, in Taylor's point, when he said it's 184,000, right? So he and I are self-employed, right? So we pay 12.4% of 184 grand. So it's about, let's call it $22,000 a year in for our Social Security. But that's not in some vault with Jeff Reddick's name on it, right? It's literally being spent on Grandma Joe and Grandpa Joe and everybody else.
I think that's people's, what people are complaining about is that, they're paying a bunch of money into something that isn't equitable. It's, hey, I worked my whole life, I paid into this, and I'm basically subsidizing people that I don't know and I don't care about. Right. And that might sound terrible to some people, but it's valid. I think
it's a very valid position until you remember, like, there are places, and you, my friend, have been to a lot of these places in the world, but there are places in the world that you can't go without like an entourage and an armored car, right? Because otherwise they're going to come take your stuff. If we don't have some kind of safety net or transition, like we could transition.
Absolutely. I mean, you can debate it. Absolutely. There's a need for it. It's just I'm being the devil's advocate.
Right. I'm just simply saying that we none of us want to pay this kind of money in, but none of us want 30% of the population homeless either, because we might want to say, well, that's their problem, they should figure it out. But you know what criminals and people that are really struggling tend to do? They make it your problem too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right. So here's the point I'm getting at. We are screwed financially, this generation, because of promises our grandparents made, and they're not here to write the check anymore. And it's
they wrote a check that their ass didn't have to cash.
So the payroll tax cap has increased over the past 10 years by roughly 56%.
Okay.
But the cost of living adjustment for Social Security, though, has only increased 31%.
So roughly half.
Yeah. So they're basically effectively kind of increasing the payroll, tax cap in order to finance Social Security.
But at what point does that machine break, though? That's my question. How long? Nobody knows for sure, but how long can that Ponzi scheme last?
Well, technically it's gonna hit the dirt in 2033. But what that simply means is, so we got some people old enough on here to remember the trust fund.
Right about the time I would be getting Social Security.
Right. So what it is in 2033, under most current assumptions, remember when I said 76 cents of every dollar is paid by today's taxes? The other 24% is paid by the 2 trillion or so they have left over in the trust fund. When that hits zero, they can either do one of three things, right? They can do more than three things, but the three basic options are this. Option one, hey, everybody, congratulations. Everybody got a 24% haircut across the board. We're paying 76 cents of every dollar out now. That's politically untenable. I highly doubt they do that. Number two, they can raise payroll taxes and bring more money in to pay more money out, which by doing the math, they'd have to raise payroll taxes by about a third. Or three, they can simply print more money, which is what our government tends to do all the time. Or fourth, a combination of all the things I just mentioned. I think what they will do is kick the can, because that's what we do in our political class, is we kick the can down the road, and they will pass some emergency funding bill, and they'll eventually do some means testing, and they'll eventually raise the retirement age, and they're going to do a combination of things, because it was never meant to pay for a 30-year retirement. There was no, I mean, not that people lived in 90 in 1935 or 1938 or whatever, but in general, it was never meant for this 3-decade plus retirement longevity puzzle. And
well,
it's a problem.
My understanding was it wasn't meant for everybody to claim. You know, so like if you have a retirement or investments and things like that, and you don't need it, it was meant to be a social safety net to keep elderly people from, like you said, being homeless and hungry. So, I mean, potentially, I think that could, what's that?
There is a fourth option.
What's
a
that?
Mysterious, virus shows up that seems to affect elderly people.
They actually, you know what? I've heard a conspiracy theory about that.
Yeah. So maybe,
not for nothing, but the mortality rate for people over the age of 80 for COVID was pretty damn high.
Yeah,
it was like 1 in 5.
It did a good job clearing out nursing homes.
It sure did.
And some of the policies they came up, kind of put that on steroids, where they were, forcing people into nursing homes.
Yep. But I mean, one way, I guess that's one way they've been trying to balance this, is they're just increasing the amount by which they're going to collect from people, which, really that's probably the easiest thing to do, is just, they're probably just going to come out one day and just say, all your income you have to pay Social Security tax on.
And Taylor's got a really, I actually, so we used to do a Social Security seminar. And I also talk about it in my tax seminar, our tax seminar. But here's why I think Taylor's 100% on point at some point. We all talk about how much we hate taxes, but push comes to shove, 95%, 98% of Americans make less than $180,000 at their job. Because remember, if you make $180,000 at your job and your wife makes $180,000 at your job, you're both paying into that, right? So it's not like the household hits that number. It's per earner. So since so few people make above that number, except for in a few areas and industries and niche coastal cities and whatnot, what's easier politically? Right? Cut benefits, or just be like, you know what? I guess we'll go ahead and charge, I don't know, Luka Doncic, payroll tax on all 30 million he earned this year, or whatever, or the orthopedic surgeon, or the actor, or the CEO. Like,
well, it's from a political standpoint, I mean, you're staying in power, and your position, appealing to the masses is the best way to do that. And what's the best way to do that is, you demonize the minority of, wealthy, and, basically pander. Like, I mean, it just happened in New York. The guy got elected. He's openly a socialist and has a bunch of socialist policies that, he wants to, basically try to make, people on the lower end, more comfortable, more happy. And of course they're going to rally behind that. But, to what end? How many wealthy people are going to move out of New York now? And how are they going to fund that?
So since 2016, actual inflation, meaning not taking the CPI number, the CPI number said we've only had a 35% increase since 2016. But if you take in the things like actual housing costs, all the child care, utilities, everything, it's closer to 80%.
Holy shit. So close to cutting your buying power in half.
Yeah, since 2016.
That's insane to me, because, I mean, basically, if you made $100,000 a year, you're roughly making $60,000 a year now.
Yep. Yeah, it really is shocking. Like, that's why people really are like really struggling, because when you look at those numbers and your wages haven't gone up 80% since 2016, especially if you're living off Social Security. Like, if you're off Social Security, that's, they've increased it by 31%. So effectively, yeah, I guess, Jeff, you're pretty dang close. It's about a 35% haircut since.
Yeah, it sucks.
So like that. I mean, we have a lot of elderly clients that come in that are really struggling, the older ones.
Oh, yeah. Well, I
that
mean, imagine if you were slightly comfortable, before, to where your house is paid off, you were making a couple grand a month to pay your car note, to, buy food, whatever. And then all of a sudden that's cut almost in half. What do you do? Basically you go from making, $5,000 a month to, and we have grandparents that are probably in that boat. And then all of a sudden, you're making 2,500.
yeah. Well,
Your cost, it's terrible.
the ones that own a home are really helped like significantly.
Oh, absolutely.
Because
do reverse mortgages
because housing has been one of the biggest drivers of that is the cost of housing, and then food is the other big one that's really like.
And that's also, you hit on, Taylor, your point is absolutely center of the bullseye, because inflation is reported, generally speaking, as this generic number, right? But what people don't realize is, so for example, I mean, all of us, I feel pretty confident that everybody we're listening, for the most part, probably has a flat screen TV in their house, right? I mean, there was a time when I graduated college, my best buddy, JJ at the time, my roommate from college, like, he made like the best like 20-something-year-old purchase you could at the time, which was a Sony Vega TV, right? The WEG, but it's pronounced Vega. And it was this gigantic 36-inch, like 280-pound vacuum tube monstrosity that took three of us up to the 3 flights of the apartment. I thought we were all going to die. And then we plugged it in. We're like, oh, right. Literally none of us can buy a TV that small anymore, right? Or at least it's ridiculous. And I think,
dude, there's computer monitors that are bigger than that.
Right. I think the last TV I bought was like 60 inches, and I think I spent $400, $350 on it. I went to like a Black Friday sale. That is, so my point is TVs have come down precipitously in price, right? And that is included in the inflation. So that's a disinflation number. So when you hear, oh, inflation's 3%, well, that includes a whole basket of things, some of which you may not be buying, right? But we're always buying food. You always got to pay rent or whatever. Like, you always got to have gas. And so now gas hasn't been that bad, relatively speaking, but food, so I guess what I'm saying is inflation is not equal, right? Inflation depends upon the category we're talking about. And unfortunately, what's happened in the last several years has been the categories that are the most necessary and frequent are the ones that have gotten tattooed the most. I mean, I don't know about you.
And they've changed the formula, because I know that they've removed and added, and the different administrations try to play this shell game to make inflation paint a picture.
I did find out recently one of the most and again, by the way, I know I'm the one that is like considered like the crazy liberal, but I really promise you I'm not. I promise you I'm so center you don't even know, because they do shady shit like this in the Biden administration and in the Obama administration. But at a different level right now, I just found out that one of the reasons why the inflation report is low is like the 2 months that the government was shut down, they put in zeros for anything that wasn't reported. So they didn't like go, well, this particular category was running at 3% from January every single month through August. We'll assume 3%. They just assumed nothing, no inflation.
So Jeff, going forward, do you think that inflation is going to come down? Because I mean, they claimed that once they got the COVID thing fixed, that inflation would start coming down, but it doesn't look like it is.
So I think we had two different. My personal opinion, what happened, and I was in that camp for quite a while. I think two different things happened. Right, we printed way too much damn money, and that's adding to just the general inflation. Separately, though, we had some pretty significant supply chain blockages, which added temporarily. So, for example, you don't see people anymore paying $20,000 over sticker for a truck.
Yeah.
Now they're trying to get you on the lot and giving you a hell of a deal to buy a truck, because nobody wants to borrow money at 7 or 8% to go borrow a car, right? But you had this confluence, because remember, at the height of COVID money printing and the height of, Biden, like I was actually fine with what Trump did the first time around stimulus wise. I was fine with what Biden did. It was the second stimulus that was just pouring gasoline on the fire. And you had people going, wait a minute, I can borrow money at like 0% and go buy, why wouldn't I? Right. And so people took that. That is the inflation that has moderated. Is you don't have this, I got to order a truck a year and a half in advance. I mean, I ordered my last car that we got as a family literally a year before we bought it, and it still came in late from the year. It took a year and 2 months. Well, that's no longer really an issue. So those things have moderated, and that kind of inflation has gone down, which was supply-based inflation. But printing the money's out there. And so I think we've kind of reset things a little bit in that regard. And I'm not sure when it's going to fix itself. I mean, we probably need a recession for it to fix itself, which, depending upon who you talk to, we may already be in one. It just depends on what your measurement is.
I wish I would have borrowed a lot more of that, all those loans that they gave out. I didn't take any of them, for those businesses.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't either. I just saw that freaking Oprah Winfrey took 3 and had them all forgiven.
Well, that's what happens when you're personal friends of the Obamas.
But I mean, holy shit, you're a billionaire and you took, and it was like 2 of them were slower. One was like for $1 million. And I'm like, I could have, and I literally remember contemplating it and like, well, I don't really need it. I mean, things are tight, but I can do without it. Now, granted, I also didn't think, this is shameful to admit on air, I probably would have been more interested had I known they were all just going to be forgiven. Right? I assumed you were going to have to pay it back, and I'm like, but
well, because you're responsible, and I mean, you understand how money works, where our government doesn't.
Clearly.
So basically, they gave out a bunch of our money and then forgave it.
But like, even if you would have just taken it out and invested it and paid it back, you'd have made a fortune.
Oh my gosh, totally.
Yeah, because like the inflation was so high that it was just like, I never even considered that as, inflation is going to be way off the charts because of all this free money.
Well, it goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning.
I'm fine with that.
Basically taking out debt to invest to make more money.
Yeah, I don't know, but yeah, I think so. Taylor, I did look up. It was 36. So I asked. I assume chat's right on this one. All right. So I asked. I'm like, give me inflation number, and then give me dollar depreciation, and then combine it together, and it comes out to be 36% since 2020. So it takes 36% more money to live the same exact lifestyle as it did in 2020 between inflation and dollar depreciation.
And people have to understand that's everybody, even if you're not getting Social Security right now, you lost that. So like, this isn't, unless I guess we could have a deflationary event that could normal, but probably not by how much our federal government's borrowing. And so when you go to claim your Social Security, you lost about 36% of its purchasing power. So you need that much more money in order to actually retire.
Well, and that's just so far.
So Papa, is it how to say Papa Guth? Papa Guth? I don't know.
Papa Guth.
So I want to address this really quickly. We may, right? But here's what people don't. I think we may have talked about this before on the show. And I'm not by no means a Fed monetary policy expert. But when the Fed cuts rates, they're cutting what's called the overnight bank lending rate. They're cutting the rate where banks can go and get money and then repay money the next day, or banks can lend money to one another and pay the next day.
Well, isn't that repos?
Repos are a little bit of a different thing, but
sorry, I don't want to get you on a rabbit trail. I was reading up on repos the other day.
But just the Fed rate is literally what does it cost to borrow money from the Fed? The reason that normally translates into lower rates in a normal economy is, let's just, again, so Taylor and I both run massive banks. I'm Wells Fargo, he's Bank of America, whatever. At some point, if you're able to borrow money for less than you used to be able to borrow for, your margins increase. And then you might go, well, gee, I want to do more loans this quarter than Bank of Taylor did. I'll lower my rates that I charge at the retail level because I'm making more margin now because I got the money less expensively. And so you get this kind of competition that flows through the entire financial ecosystem, right? Generally speaking. However,
did not know that.
The people think what we care about, though, is what most people think is the Fed lowers rates. I pay less on my mortgage. I pay less on my car note if I get a new one, right? If I get a new mortgage or new car note. The problem with that is what drives that, what banks and lending institutions use to finance that money. They get their money in the door and they buy 10-year treasuries. They buy a bunch of treasuries, but they buy particularly the 10-year treasury. But the 10-year treasury is not directly affected by the Federal Reserve doing their thing. The Federal Reserve making banks cheaper to borrow money doesn't change what the treasury trades at, except that if rates go down lower in general, then the government usually can usually lower the rates on the treasuries of what they're trying to issue, because the entire ecosystem has a lower expectation for what things should pay. However, we are in a world right now that and I think it's a confluence of things, I've talked about this before, because Trump is so unpredictable, good and bad, because Doge is so far an utter failure as far as actually cutting things. We're now spending like $7.5. I mean, we have added like $1 trillion plus to the deficit.
Oh yeah, they've identified all kinds of waste, but they haven't cut anything.
So because we actually haven't followed through with that, the marginal buyer of treasuries, which is massive institutions and other foreign countries, are going, yeah, you might want to issue a 10-year at 3%, but we don't want to buy it unless it's paying us 4%.
Because they're basically buying debt. They're buying the U.S. debt, and they have to feel that it's a good investment. And right now, people are looking at our economy and looking at our inflation, looking at kind of the overall picture, the macro, and it doesn't look good.
Yeah. So my point is, we have actual inflation around 9%, and then you're going to lend out your money at 4%, you're losing money every year.
Exactly.
But here's I guess what I'm getting at is the Federal Reserve, and it may work, right? Because it is how it normally works. But just we can look at this. If you look right after Trump got elected, before he took office, but after he got elected, the Federal Reserve cut rates in December of that year, 2024, and the 10-year went up. And then it just happened again. The last time the Fed cut rates, 2 months ago or something like that? The 10-year treasury is up from then. That's not how it's normally worked. Normally there's been this correlation, and right now there's not, which tells me the bond market, which is much bigger, the treasury market's the biggest market in the world. It's much bigger than the stock market. That tells me that the average buyer of treasuries is like, yeah, I don't really care that you want lower rates because we don't want lower rates. So we'll see. It's going to be really interesting.
Well, yeah. I mean, we can look at this and you can see this is RWA.XYZ, which is basically what's happening right now with traditional finance and a lot of these, different traditional investment vehicles, where they are tokenizing. They're, putting all of this traditional finance stuff on chain, digitizing it to make it more liquid, make it to where it can be, traded 24/7, moved digitally, and, ownership, all that kind of stuff. And you can see U.S. Treasury debt is the largest one that they've tokenized, currently sitting at $8.6 billion. Then you got commodities, you got institutional alternative funds, private credit, non-U.S. government debt. Just so you know, the U.S. Treasury debt is, basically the bonds and stuff like that. You got public equity, private equity, actively managed strategies, corporate bonds, just all kinds of different things. But this is, shows you, how big those markets are. Is that the U.S. debt, or the treasuries, is the market share of what's being tokenized.
Right, and that's just on the token side. So so I just looked this up. Outstanding treasury debt market is about $30 trillion. That's bills, notes, bonds, TPS, market treasury security, right? So I guess all I'm saying is this. Let's just say rates were really low, but I have kind of mediocre credit. That doesn't mean someone wants to lend me money. I'm not saying I actually have mediocre credit. I'm saying imagine I have mediocre credit. So if I want to lend money, people are going to look at my credit. And on the one hand, we are the reserve currency of the world. We have the biggest army. We know historically that we're going to pay. So why then because you've heard our president say we should have the lowest rates in the world, we're the best, right? And I get why he says that, but here's the problem. When you look at the dollar, it's fallen 10% this year, 12% last year against every other major currency. So if you're Japan or you're Germany or you're the EU or you're freaking Switzerland or pick someplace, Australia, are you going to go, you know what? I'm going to park my money in a treasury at the United States because I know it's safe.
That I'm going to lose.
Then when I want to get my money out, if I wait a year, they're going to pay me 4%, but I'm going to lose 10% in value because they're being so responsible. So because we can't keep our damn fiscal pants shut, basically, we can't control ourselves and our spending. Everybody else is like, sure, we'd like to secure the United States, but we don't want to give you 100 Japanese, whatever, yen or whatever it is, and get back 90, which I totally understand. And so the dollar depreciating is a huge problem for us, and it's primarily driven by these tariffs and other things. And we got to fix that because until we fix it,
I think it's only going to get worse. What Papa Guth here is saying, one of the driving factors will be Trump's need for a hot economy for midterms. He will need to implement some sort of buying for, basically, QE. So, I've heard a lot of people say that, for the Republicans to, not lose control of the House or the Senate or, things like that, in the midterms, that the economy needs to look good, and that's what Biden was trying to do, during the elections for Harris, was they were trying to make the economy look better. They were trying to make inflation look lower. They were trying to make, the unemployment numbers better. They were just trying to paint this picture of prosperity. And I don't see, do either of you see any way for, this administration to, make things better other than turning on the printing machines?
Well, I tell you something that I think is interesting that I read this morning, or I read last night. So Trump's administration, I don't know if it's Trump himself or just his administration, have enacted hundreds of exemptions for individual companies and subsectors and industries against the tariffs because they made such a big deal out of it. They can't just go back on it, but they also know, whoever wrote, Papa pointed out, they need the economy to kick up. And so these things are counterbalanced, right? So they're literally, on the one hand, talking about getting tariffs from X, Y, and Z, but then they're going to individual companies and giving them preferred trader status so they don't, so that now they have a real edge in the marketplace. And so I think this is one of the reasons why we have the stock market doing one thing and people's personal economy doing another. And we'll see which one wins. But I do agree that if the economy is not better for the average person by November, I think James Carville, the Democratic strategist, when Bush lost to Clinton, his most famous quote ever is, "It's the economy, stupid." Like, if the economy is good,
there is a way that they could do it. They would need to invade a wealthy country and maybe strip some assets.
One with oil and some natural resources.
Maybe some silver mines that this country has. And take those
rare earth minerals. I'm just saying, hypothetically.
The wealthiest country on the planet per capita, and it's crazy that they're not. I do think we're going to have to see a debt reset at some point. I think the way they're going to do it, though, is I think they're going to wait till the next time rates really get low, and they're going to and I think they're going to try to refinance the debt.
I honestly think, and this will be my closing thoughts because we're out of time, is I think that's why Trump is pushing Powell so hard to lower rates, because I think that's what they're hoping is they need to bring rates down so that they can refinance the debt and have any hope of pulling out of this nosedive. Taylor, closing thoughts.
This is how empires fall apart. Like this is you're just watching history repeat itself once again, and we're playing the same thing. And it really comes down to fundamentally responsibility. Like you can't just put all of your assets and wealth into your military. The military doesn't really build anything. Like if you look at China compared to us, China has put all their money into their infrastructure. I mean, they put it in military too, but they put most of it into infrastructure. They are poised for the robot revolution to be able to pull it off. We aren't, and we're not putting the money into it because we're taking all of our money and we put it into healthcare and we put it into military. And those are two assets.
There's no return.
There's no return on. And so
I do think I completely agree. I think one more thing on the big print comment and the comment about the hyperinflating away, which is certainly possible. The one thing that I think is really scary, like if I were going to pick a conspiracy that might actually long-term come true, kind of the one world government thing, is this is an American problem in the sense that we're the largest economy, but this is not endemic to us, right? So I just looked this up, GDP ratio. Japan's the highest at 230 to 237, then Italy at 135, America at about 120, France 113, Canada 111, United Kingdom is about at 101, and then it goes down from there, but China's at 88, India's at 82. This is a world, it's not quite worldwide, but it's a first world problem for sure. Western civilization problem, absolutely for sure. Europe and America and in Japan. And then as China and particularly India wants to lift an entire, hundreds of millions of people out of poverty, they're also going to have to start printing and doing these things. And so there's a world in which I think the world's like $334 trillion in debt globally. Like I don't know how you get out of that without some kind of jubilee at some point in time. Without just going, sorry, nobody owes and nobody pays, and we're just resetting it all right now. And when that happens, or if that happens, man, everything changes. And I don't know. I hope it doesn't happen in my lifetime, because I literally work in finance. But you gotta wonder, right? It's got to end sometime, and it ain't going to get paid back, at least not with dollars that matter. So I don't know. It was a real interesting weekend, and I think we're gonna have some good shows coming up the next couple of weeks for sure.
I like it. Well, gentlemen, I would have to say that these shows are probably one of my favorites that we do here, because there's just so much value that you two bring. So again, as always, thank you so much for taking the time to, talk to the community and kind of, educate us all on all this. Cause I know I learn a bunch, like on the Wednesday show with David and Jake, who speak about DeFi. I learned so much from these shows. So thank you, gentlemen. I hope you have a great day, great week. Thank you to everybody out there on the Arena, YouTube X, all the places we're streaming. Until next time, Veteran Crypto out.
Thank you.